guessing raid bosses is pretty much impossible at this point, but it could be Xivu, could be Worm God, could be some darkness entity. But
could be Taniks again.
Oh no! Could you imagine?
Taniks, but with darkness.
Could you imagine? Welcome back to another podcast episode. Today we have quite a bit to talk about, wouldn't you say? You know, a little bit.
Just a smidgen of news, like just a tiny helping on the side.
Some stuff came out, probably more info than, when was the last time it was revealed? Probably this time last year, or even last summer, a while ago. We'll say that.
Yeah, it's like 13, 14 months ago with the Beyond Light reveal, probably.
So we got a mountain of stuff that came out, mountain of announcements and news and trailers and information. Pretty much all of it unanimously very good, very exciting. The only downside is that we've got to wait until February to actually play this stuff. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about today, which can basically be nerding out about everything that came out and hopefully covering as much as possible, though I'm not sure if we'll be able to cover everything in time in this episode, but we're going to try at least. But as always, massive thanks to you guys, everyone that supports these episodes. Every time we drop one of these, there's always just so much love. I'm always overwhelmed by how many people are just like supporting and saying they love the show, and the comments are just like tons of them. I read all of them, so it doesn't go unnoticed, and we appreciate everyone who says nice things about our podcast. So appreciate everyone who enjoys. If you'd like to support, then help the algorithms out. You can drop a like rating on the YouTube video. What else is there? You can, I guess, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can check out the clips on the other channel. What is it? 5-star on iTunes, subscribe on Spotify. Click all the buttons, all the things, like, favorite, subscribe, +1, whatever you can do. Anyway,
do the thing that make the algorithm go burr. There we go. That's what I was trying to say.
But yeah, this is going to be a big episode. Finally, after, what was it, like 7 years, we finally have the reveal of, well, I guess not 7 years of this enemy, but after a long, many-year build-up, Savathun. Finally, this enigmatic character who, for a long time, wasn't even like, we hadn't even seen what she looked like, her voice, or any, just the biggest villain in Destiny history, surpassing Oryx, yet we hadn't seen anything, except now we finally have almost just a ridiculous amount to go over. So, Savathun, what are your thoughts on Savathun? The character, her motives, what she's up to? Because obviously you've got a lot to say about this and the backstory and the lore. So I'm interested to get into your thoughts on Savathun as a character.
So I think that the only way you could do Savathun justice in a story sense is if you'd had some big build up, you'd had things being teased for a very long time, if you had things that were kind of hinting towards where she was going with this for a very long time. And it turns out that Bungie has been doing that since the very beginning. So go ahead and get this. One of the first interactions we had with Savathun in Destiny 2, all the way back in vanilla, was the Savathun song strike. And do you remember the key thing of that? Was that Guardians were basically being sacrificed to fuel Hive magic, but they were specifically having their void light siphoned off from them into crystals that you would then have to destroy. That might have been our very first hint as to what Savathun's agenda was.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, the further back you look, the more Savathun references you have, the more that you can get the sense that she is either tampering with or playing with the idea of the light itself, or alternatively, is building force and power towards some kind of really grand confrontation. You know, there's really foreboding nonsense.
I've seen, I think, like similar to what you're talking about in terms of like her just like harvesting guardians, and I think it was kind of alluded to in that very first trailer of that thing in the swampy forest that's like, I guess I'm not sure if anyone knows what it is, but the big crystal type thing that looks like it's kind of harvesting some kind of energy, or she's definitely doing something where she's manipulating the light and guardians. And yeah, like you said, she's been doing that since Savathun's song, one of the very first strike missions in D1 vanilla.
it's worth noting too, like, we still don't know how she's as you know, if you've not heard this bit, then oh my gosh, watch the reveal. Like, don't let us say it for you. Watch the reveal. It's phenomenal. But yeah, Savathun's entire deal this time around is that her and her hive now use the light. And of course, that's, you know, probably one of the bigger plot twists in Destiny. I'd say it's honestly bigger than Guardians using the darkness, because we'd always had like little thoughts and hints towards the possibility of that, but I don't know of a single person who thought about the idea of Hive potentially using light.
Plus the fact that it's the Hive. Yeah. The Hive, like if you said the Fallen using the light, we already kind of / have that, are going to have that. It's not to the Cabal, not the Vex, but like the Hive are the Hive are literally just the token dark evil minions of the dark. You would never possibly imagine them to be using the light. So it's just like, it really is complete opposites when you see, it's clever. You know, I always talk about how I appreciate with the big grand story plot twists, and when they're able to tie these big loops in and make them come full circle to the point where now we have Guardians have always been the good guys with the light, now using darkness, and now you have the most evil, biggest, baddest enemy being Savathun and her Hive using the light. So it's just like a complete backwards. When you see the trailer of just like thralls using, what was it, using the blade barrage and nova bombs. It's just like, what am I watching right
calling
now?
down like landfall from Stormcaller, and you're like, that isn't right, dude.
I thought they were Guardians at first. When I saw them, I was like, are they new?
Like,
I thought they were the new supers.
It's so deliberate too, because they're deliberately posed in that sense. You know, you've got,
they look like
I think it's like represented by a wizard, an acolyte, and a knight, right? But each of them is using one of the three elements. And when there's a little prelude to it, just before you actually see them, you hear the sounds of 3 Guardian supers go off.
Yeah.
I think it's
that's gonna be annoying.
Sentinel Shield, the Dawnblade, and something to do with Arc. But it all goes off in the background, and you think, oh, I recognize that, that noise. It's those guys.
I thought they were Guardians. Right? I thought they were showcasing the new reworked light subclasses, and I thought, oh, their supers look a bit different. And I was like, oh, that's a acolyte using that's a wizard using a hunter super. What's going on there? It's backwards. But yeah, I mean the Hive with ghosts. It's also playing on something which we've talked about before, and something I pointed out in a few videos about the kind of common recurring theme of these villains trying to steal the light. Obviously, you had Gaul, the OG Destiny 2 launch villain, trying to steal the light, which he nearly got close with, but didn't really succeed, wasn't like worthy. Then you had Aramis, which I thought was very interesting. I've been heard kind of trying to steal the light. She didn't really earn it. She kind of hijacked it and used these machines to somewhat steal it, but again, wasn't worthy. She got frozen. And now you have Savathun, who is so clever, and she's managed to... So what I say?
Do you mean the darkness? Aramis is all about darkness.
Oh, yeah. Trying to steal the darkness, I meant. But then you have Savathun, who's clever enough to somehow do what Gaul couldn't do, and she's able to steal. Well, I guess evidently not steal. Evidently she's going to earn, or somehow, if she's got ghosts, she's figured out something that we don't, so...
That's the biggest mystery too, right? It's Gaul seemed all well and good, like he forcefully took the light, and it made some sense then when he was rejected. Savathun and the way that she gets light has caused ghosts to appear. And that in itself is a little terrifying, because the Traveler makes ghosts, The implication there is that either she has had some kind of effect where she's been able to get the Traveler to create these things, or alternatively, she's mastered some means by which she can manipulate the Traveler to choose the Hive and her, or maybe the Traveler just chose her, which is a terrifying idea. But I feel as though all of these lend into the moral grayness that they're now trying to paint with all of this, Just in the same way that the Exo Stranger was like, hey, darkness is just a tool. If there was another expression of this that you could use to flip on its head and prove the same point, this would be it. This is perfect for proving that moment.
I feel like I would be leaning towards the second one you said, which is her, I think, and I'm sure there's a lot more about this that you could weigh in on, but I feel like I'm leaning towards, and I think Bungie's kind of giving some evidence of this, that the Traveler isn't really this kind of magical living godlike being. I think it really is more just like a simple machine that just works and doesn't work. And that's what I remember Console, when him and Ghoul were talking, he was saying that like Ghoul was talking about it as if it's this magical like godlike being, whereas Console, who I think probably knew more than him, was saying like it's just a machine, it's not actually this special thing, it's just literally if you follow these parameters it will give you light. So I think it's more along the lines of the Traveler isn't this kind of special, you know, benevolent being with like thoughts and opinions. I think it really is more just like if you just do these things, it will just give you light. We've seen that with, you know, with Aldrin. It doesn't really discriminate. It's just like if you meet this criteria, it just will make you a guide. And I think that's kind of what Savathun's figured out. I think she's figured out a way to just do what the machine wants and just get the light and kind of prove that the Traveler isn't that special, Guardians aren't that special. It's just kind of like if you meet the criteria, it will just give you light. Kind of how the darkness, we thought it was this, you know, complex evil thing, but it's kind of like if you just accept it and work with it, it will just give you powers. And like both sides, they're both just two sides of a coin, which is what Bungie's trying to say. But what do you think about that?
I feel like there is more complexity to them, but I think that's predominantly because we get communications from both on a regular basis, and there seems to be some opposition. You know, the Traveler is a lot more quiet with its stuff, but us, Ikora, Crow, and even Clovis Bray back when he was a human at various points have received visions and dreams from the Traveler that have seemed to be very clearly communicated. The Clovis Bray one is really interesting too, because it actually appears in his journal, and it's all about like, hey, you know, every single time, you know, people go ahead and they're tempted by this greed and you essentially end up destroying your family. It's kind of the gist of what's going on in that one. But you know it's the Traveler because it's communicating as the quote Alpha Lupi, the mother wolf.
Yeah, it has those, the transcripts where it was saying things like flee and all of that. Yeah, it's it's so hard to understand what it even
exactly.
But, you know, I guess obviously by design,
it's tough. But that's also the case with the darkness. You know, the darkness communicates more often with people when they die or with us. But I feel like anything communicating with Guardians is just kind of a reference to how special we are in a story sense for all of this. You know, it's one of these things of we are able to, as Guardians, affect the universe in a way that no one else can. And we are, in a strange way, sort of the decision makers and the axis on which the entire universe is going to turn. You know, previously we were the only paracausal beings that had ever seen the Traveler's light through the ghosts, you know, and it was unique in that particular sense. We were able to make our own fate in that particular way, and we were never morally bound to good. But now we also wield darkness. So in a strange way, we are this really unique combination of all the great powers in the universe. And as seems to be the case, commonly we are the fate makers. We are the ones that decide what's going on. So yeah, man, like the complications of darkness and light are something that I don't think anyone can adequately answer until maybe Lightfall and Final Shape. But yeah, that's... There's a lot still to be answered on that front.
These are the things that interest me, the kind of the big... Because like the Destiny lore gets very philosophical and into like physics and astrophysics and like the nature of the universe and existence and good versus evil. Like, obviously at its core, it's a video game. But the writers and the people who are creating the narrative, they definitely know some stuff about the universe and like morality and good versus evil and light versus like. There's a lot of very philosophical themes which I always enjoy. I'm very much into philosophy. I know you are as well. So these are things that always interest me when you have these kind of these villains and what is good, and the line between good and evil is very thin, and which side are you on, and two sides of a coin. Like it's just they're doing it very well. We've come a long way from the days of just like, oh, the Cabal are doing something, stop them, to now we're like just getting into the real stuff, like the real big bad enemies and light and dark and the pyramids. So it's just good to see Destiny is like story wise, as we always praise. The story is always, you know, it's just getting better and better. But especially Savathun as well. Very impressed with how they've done her character. Her design looks incredible. Like this giant
inspired
moth demon, like skeleton.
Can we talk about something on that for a second? Because there's a really cool thing that I think people have missed. And this kind of relates to the Season of the Lost, so little spoilers there if you've not played the first mission. the end of Season of the Lost's first mission, of course, you meet Savathun entombed within that big construct.
Very cool.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's a spawn-in animation for that. And it names it within the Eververse store as, quote, the Chrysalis. And then in the next thing where it's Witch Queen, she has grown butterfly wings, which is a very neat little
kind
tie
of cocoon.
in there.
Yeah.
Because so it's a cocoon literally for her metamorphosis.
It just looks so cool. Like it's one of those. It really, like, watching the trailer, it really gave me a lot of like Taken King and Forsaken vibes, pretty much. Like, it just looks like both of those, especially the Savathun's throne world. It looks a lot like the Dreaming City, which is a good thing. Just, a very, very good thing. And you would imagine it's, I mean, the Dreadnought was the past benchmark of like a really good destination that was well fleshed out. And obviously Forsaken, just with the Dreaming City, destroyed that. That was just so ridiculously intricate and had so many puzzles and secrets. And I would imagine, from what Bungie have said, Savathun's throne world is going to be hopefully a step up. You know, obviously, can't imagine like Luke said, we're not going to get like the size and scope of Forsaken, but I do think with her throne world, they are going to go all out with just secrets and puzzles and just like. Plus, it's a throne world, so it's kind of like a fantasy dimension where anything goes. It's not the real world, so they can just make stuff up. It gives them a license to just do whatever.
Yeah,
it's pretty much like Oryx's raid inside there. It's just like anything goes. So expecting to see some weird stuff, but Savathun as a character, very impressed. And also, like we've been saying many times in pretty much all the episodes, you asking about like when do you think we'll actually see her? We're going to face her. She'll be an enemy. And I was saying about how like it would be such a letdown if she was just this, you know, I'm a villain, I'm here to kill you, bad guy. It's just, she's so much more complex, and she has motives, and she's like being trickery. You know, where she's lying. You don't know whether she's telling the truth. She's like abducted Osiris, and it's also that as well. Very impressive. The fact that because in the cutscene it was very interesting, because again, I always love the perspectives. They're playing very heavily on the idea of perspective and how, oh, you think you're the good guys and the light and all this, but really from my perspective, we're just two people both using different powers. But she was saying how she's kind of like helped us out and orchestrated the past couple seasons, and through Osiris been fighting her other sister Xivu. So she is kind of like, obviously again, you don't know how much you can trust her, but she has kind of been helping us out in some ways, but she has been screwing us over in other ways. So that's just what I enjoy. It's a complex, the character development and just the character in general is very well done, because you don't know exactly what she's up to. You don't know, like, is she genuinely going to be on our side? Is she just using us for something? Like, you don't know her motive. So just hats off to Bungie in terms of her character development, because again, she's not just a villain that's showing up here to kill you. She has really complex motives, and you don't really know where you stand. So I always love that.
So this, I think, is actually the biggest point that I think people might miss, but something which I think needs to be highlighted, which is effectively the story of the Witch Queen expansion itself actually started 4 months ago, back in the season of the Splicer. And the reason I say that is because of this. I mean, you could even say it went all the way back to the season of the Hunt, but I'm going to say season of the Splicer.
Or Forsaken.
I mean, potentially, but the really big wind-up for it all, for me, starts when Savathun starts to enter the story within these seasons. And we get this introduction to it, and we have that capstone moment to the season where Osiris flees, basically. And then, of course, in the first mission of the Season of the Lost, we find out that Osiris, of course, has been possessed by Savathun. And this is much to the chagrin of Saint 14, and much to the shock of most of the player base who hadn't been spoiled of these things. Because, of course, this was in spoilers. But the incredible thing about all of this is it gives us now the same kind of character development that we could have gotten from Saint 14 and Mithrax, right? And we have room for that stuff to breathe, which is going to make it feel better. So as a way of proving the point, I'm going to depart from the Savathun point for a moment and talk about Saint and Mithrax, right? Imagine if the Season of the Splicer was instead a campaign, and if in the space of 6 hours, Saint 14 went from hating Mithrax's guts because he was a fallen, to standing by him and saying, your people are my people, you know? Imagine that, how silly that would feel after 6 hours. Instead, the Season of the Splicer took two characters that clearly had a lot of motive to be against each other, and then they stood there and they had character dynamics that developed over the weeks and through the seasons, and that gave this sense of real time and real progression. And it gave Saint, in our own perspective, time to then sit there and really challenge his own beliefs and then land upon a new set of beliefs and really develop as a character. And that's genius, because you went from Saint the Crusader who killed all the Fallen to Saint who is protecting the Elixni in the Elixni Quarter. Here's the thing. End of the story mission for the first mission of the Season of the Lost. We sat down, we had a cutscene with Savathun. Every single week there might be an instance where we sit down and talk with Savathun at the Crystal.
Probably, yeah.
And if that's the case, her story has effectively started now. And Witch Queen, instead of being an expansion that has to tell the entire story of one of Destiny's greatest villains in the amount of time that it has, can start telling that story now, and it gives us a degree of history with this villain. You know, this is effectively, you know, one of the few times this has been done before is us killing Crota and giving us motive on the side of reasons why we know Oryx has been pissed off. You know, this is the same kind of development turned up to 11 in a certain sense, because you're actually sitting down and talking with Savathun. She's actively going to be manipulating you, because let's be honest, you know, that's entirely what she did. That entire recounting in the cutscene of what she did to help us, I mean, that was all gaslighting, basically. That was all lies and deception, all complete deceit. Like totally trying to change our worldview in accordance to what was happening, but also what absolutely was not her motive. And so it's one of these things where you can sit down and you can say, she is going to by default be a better villain than any other villain in Destiny has been before, because she's been given room to develop and room to breathe. Every single week, we are going to get something with Savathun, either by her being mentioned by the characters or her talking to us at the Crystal at the end of the week.
Yeah.
That is going to change the dynamic. It's going to mean that however she does it, when she eventually escapes at the end of the Season of the Lost, because I presume she's got to, and makes her way back to her throne world, it's going to be one of these moments of, okay, this just got personal. So suddenly we have this really fantastic build-up for a villain. And the campaign already, as a result, is going to be a 9 out of 10 for story stuff. It's really going to be about what Bungie does. Biggest thing of all. I don't think that with this kind of development, Savathun even needs to be a raid villain. And I say that knowing that previously I've always endorsed the raid as like the capstone to a 3-act structure. But we have months of time to sit here and listen with Savathun and really develop what's going on. And if that's the case, we get to sit here and actually build that relationship, build that character, and the campaign can be the capstone all on its own. And it can be a marvelous capstone because she's made Hive Guardians. She's made Hive Lightbearers. That in itself is the end game threat. That in itself is huge. It changes the entirety of the world. She's already done enough as a statement to be Destiny's best villain to date, full stop.
Oh yeah, easy. Now I think, I probably, I mean, I think we even said this in a previous episode as well, but I don't think she'll be the raid boss. I mean, so we know the raid is set in the pyramid, which is in, so you've got the Savathun's throne world, which is like this giant swamp, which is seemingly like it's the swamps of Ultra Cargo. Seems like Bungie have kind of brought that kind of location in, which is cool. It definitely did seem that way. So you've got this giant like forest swamp area.
At least in aesthetic, at least.
And then
absolutely.
above it, you've got her, what is it? Her castle, her kingdom, the big bowl. Savathun's giant big bowl that's perched on the edge. So that's her throne world. But then on the other side of the swamp, you've got this pyramid. And it says that on the, on the Bungie have said themselves that the raid takes place in the pyramid against some kind of ancient evil. So doesn't sound like it would be Savathun. Can't imagine what the raid boss, guessing raid bosses is pretty much impossible at this point, but it could be could be Xivu, could be Worm God, could be some darkness entity, But
Could be Taniks again.
Oh no! Could you imagine?
Taniks, but with darkness.
Could you imagine? I almost wish they did. That would be almost.
That would be such a brilliant piss take.
But just not even like don't even edit anything. Just literally, just don't even like just have any alterations. Just the same. Like it's still on the shank as well. Just not even any different. Or just OG Taniks. Just like yeah, I'm here. Just not even, just completely break the fourth wall and just don't even pretend, like act like nothing's happening. Oh, you're expecting some kind of big darkness? Like the entire raid is all just taken, and then it's just the final boss is just Taniks. Surprise!
Oh,
it's me again.
Could you imagine that though? We have this moment where he does this menacing battle cry out towards us, and out of nowhere, Mithrax is in our ear, and he's like, he said, "Why are you in my house?" He finally has a house. It's just the pyramid inside Savathun's throne world.
Have we seen the last of Taniks? Will we ever?
Taniks will live forever, man. Taniks is the meme. It's the gift that keeps on giving, really.
I think. So who do you think will be the obviously complete speculation, but who do you think will be the raid boss or enemy? What do you think is the deal with the pyramid inside the swamp?
So, theory. I think that it's going to be a minion of some kind of Xivu Arath. And the reason I say that is because, or at very least it's going to have some kind of connection to Xivu Arath. Reason being is that Xivu is hunting Savathun in this season. And we've got a very big kind of build-up here from Mara, which says that Xivu Arath is hunting Savathun, but at the request of another. And here's the thing, Xivu has not done what Savathun has clearly done here and strayed from the path of darkness. Xivu has been apparently still continuing to feed her worm quite well, because she literally made war on the Cabal of all people. So she is probably doing just great. But if there is that tangible link between Xivu Arath and the darkness, then it would make all the sense in the world that the pyramid is a place from which Xivu's forces could potentially kick off their own campaign against Savathun's brood and continue to hunt her down. And this is even more sort of amplified by the fact that this season you have these whispers within the sort of astral alignment stuff, just the activities generally, the two activities you've got for Season of the Lost, where it talks about how the Hive, the Taken, and the Scorn are all coordinating. The Hive, which belonged to Xivu Aurath, the Taken, which have now supposedly fallen under her control, after, Savathun lost control of them thanks to Coria, which means that Xivu now needs to be the binding will towards them, meaning maybe the darkness has taught her how to take two. And then the Scorn, which are fascinating because we learned back on the Glycan mission in Presage that the Scorn can be conduits through which the darkness can speak. And so it's one of those things of all these enemies that are really deeply bound and connected to the darkness could then be at Xivu's command. Which means that if you're looking at the darkness as its tangible link to Xivu, suddenly the pyramid ship there maybe isn't something that Savathun has broken down and busted, although for all I know it could be. Maybe instead it's something where it was being used as a beachhead for the forces of Xivu Arath that were trying to attack Savathun.
Yeah, because you got to wonder how it got there.
Yeah, like how did that get there,
How did that get there? Pyramid seems to be showing up in a lot of places down in the moon. There's one on Europa. They're just random pyramids about the place. But that is an interesting development. So I think I even asked that like months and months ago about how like would Xivu and Savathun like allied, but now clearly I guess they're not. They're enemies. So it seems like, and also Savathun is, I guess she has lost the Taken. She's not in control now that Curia is down. Yeah. So now the Taken have gone to. It's just interesting, like all these like war politics and now these sides changing over.
Dude,
so now
I love it.
The Taken are with
so
Xivu.
Good.
So now you got Xivu is pretty much now the new Taken King Queen, and you would assume she'd be the main boss of Lightfall, and then you got Savathun who's trying to be a guardian, trying to be on the light. So it does seem like it's just so interesting. You got both these sisters, and now I mean I always wondered like they can't both be on the same side. Surely they'd be allied, but it does make sense now that they're clearly not. And seems like Xivu is on the darkness side, who I imagine would face in Lightfall, and then Savathun is trying to be wants to join our side. But
so It's a really interesting one too, because the dynamic was never really clear. We saw taken versions of Xivu Arath's daughters in the Dreaming City way back when, which implied that there was some kind of strife between the sisters. And then, you have other bits in time which aren't so clearly defined, where Savathun basically gifts the deception of allowing Xivu to enter into the Cabal homeworld of Toro Battle. And it's one of these strange back and forths, and the timestamps for those aren't exact. But at this point in time, it seems very clear that either, we are fully in the point of believing another deception of Savathun, that, Xivu is in fact trying to hunt her, or alternatively, it's not a deception, Xivu is trying to hunt her, and there is a divergence between the two daughters of the Osmium dynasty. And it's really exciting either way, because you're sitting there and you're actually seeing big development on both sides of them. And Xivu appears to be much more aligned with the darkness nowadays, which makes sense considering her character. And Savathun, this is actually a really important one too. Savathun, if we're looking all the way back to the Shadowkeep lore, isn't necessarily trying to become a guardian. Savathun is trying to live. Savathun is trying to survive.
Survive, yeah.
Because she's seen this. Yeah, get rid of the worm for starters. But she's also seen this this quote-unquote coming cataclysm, according to some lore back in Shadowkeep. And that's become really relevant now because, we have Lightfall coming up, which looks like it was going to be bad for us. Then you have the Final Shape, which sounds like it could be bad for everything. And so it's one of these things of, if Savathun is trying to control... Yeah, exactly. Bad for your health, generally.
Bad for everything in the universe, it seems.
This is an extreme overdose of entropy.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it really seems as though she's just trying to fulfill her own ends and live out through this particular cataclysm or stop it from coming. And so her entire shtick of taking the light is a fascinating play for power, but it's one that makes sense, which is, it's totally fascinating.
Speaking looking into the dynamics. What do you think of the Final Shape? So we now know the name of the last expansion, kind of last. They're still going to continue after it, but we now know what this final chapter after Lightfall. Lightfall was supposed to be the final one, Beyond Light, and then Witch Queen, and then Lightfall. But now we've got the fourth one, the Final Shape, and obviously, as we were saying, Destiny gets into very deep. Just like the nature of the universe and entropy, and that's what the pyramid stuff. It's so I almost wonder how Bungie are gonna try and explain this stuff, because it really gets deep, and you know so much more about this. But as far as like the pyramids and wanting like the final shape in terms of just rearranging the particles of the universe to be the perfect shape, because that's kind of what it is, isn't it? It's just their vision of just. Is it entropy of just like death of everything, or like what do they want? What is their deal?
So the final shape refers kind of to the Darkness's idea of the sword logic. The idea is this.
We're gonna get really deep here, folks. By the way, this is into deep like astrophysics and like space lore.
Like that swamp that we were talking about in Savathun's Surround World. Yeah, we're chucking you guys in the deep end of the swamp. I'm sorry. But yeah, okay, so sword logic, right? It all relates back to that really simple principle, which is basically that the strongest, simplest life is the best and will survive. And the sword logic has this really interesting idea that more complicated, less successful forms of life ultimately are actually cruel. And the reason being is because they have all of these unnecessary developments and then they will just die to the stronger life anyway. And so it's one of these things of darkness, and the sword logic kind of sums up what the Hive would call a sort of sacred purpose, The idea is that you are to purge the universe of all life that isn't strong enough to resist being purged. And ultimately, as you go and shop through all of the life in the universe and start to whittle everything down, you start to approach what is termed as the perfect final shape. And that's where it is a being so strong that nothing can challenge it and nothing ultimately can overcome it. That is what is presumed to be the perfect quote-unquote final shape.
That's the darkness's motive.
Indeed. That's the darkness's vision. That's the entire point of everything going forward. And it's even elegantly summed up in the actual geometry of the darkness and the traveler.
Yeah.
So the simplest sided shape that you can get is a four-sided shape, aka the darkness pyramids, because they have four sides, a base and three on the top. Whereas the complexity that the Traveler desires is reflected best in the fact that it's a sphere, which is one side, but technically it's also an infinite number of sides, which then leads you to the very interesting idea of bomb logic, which is strength through complexity. It's effectively the Traveler's version of sword logic. It's the practical opposite. It's two ways within which you define what makes life strong within the universe. You know, the perfect final shape is mentioned a lot thanks to Oryx and the Books of Sorrow way back when, and that's where we actually first hear about it. And cutting things down to that perfect final shape has been the Hive's motive for the longest time. But it's also very clear that this motive comes directly from the darkness itself, you know? So assuming that in Lightfall, in just broad stroke terms coming from the name, something terrible happens to the Traveler and something cataclysmic occurs, the final shape implies that there's this grand victory for the darkness. Of course, there may be some kind of subversion of tropes where it turns out that we Guardians are indeed the final shape. And
I was going to say.
The final shape is not actually about the darkness or the light, but, you know, it really implies that's the direction it's going. And that's just, you know, having effectively two big expansions about the darkness. It's got the potential to be effectively the Thanos of Infinity War and the Thanos of Endgame, if they do it right. They just need to develop the darkness better and to actually give it a characterization, a motive, and they've kind of started doing that, just a wee bit. In Presage, we heard that there was, quote, a voice behind the darkness, you know, so it separated the idea of the power of the darkness from a living consciousness that was within it and behind it, just in the same way that, you know, the light, as Guardians use it as a power, is not the same as the Traveler. So the more we get to know whatever that consciousness is, the better those future expansions are going to get. That's where things start to get really fascinating.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned Thanos, because it is, you know, like we're saying, it does get to that kind of level of these giant villains trying to create their perfect vision of the universe. And I guess that's kind of what, like you said, the darkness and the pyramids are trying to create this perfect form of the ultimate existence of life, and by killing things and killing everything that isn't perfect. And then the Traveler and Light is trying to do the opposite, trying to just create life and trying to create as much light as possible and trying to see what wins. But it's just, yeah, we could talk about this deep cosmic space lore, but it really does go deep. But like I said, it's the stuff that it does very much interest me, because it's very, very philosophical and very, very complex. But hopefully, hopefully people are still with us. We didn't just bore everyone with a whole bunch of cosmic space talk. But like I said, it's very interesting stuff. But we've got Lightfall and the Final Shape, which doesn't sound sounds very ominous, but it's good to know that there's Bungie have got a solid roadmap, and we've still got a lot of stuff. We've got Witch Queen, Lightfall, Final Shape, and then who knows what they'll do after. I would imagine some kind of continuous just, we could talk about the game and the lore side of things, but if we talk about business financial side of things, obviously Bungie it's in their best interest to keep Destiny going. It's their cash cow. It makes them tons and tons and tons of money, probably close to billions at this point over the franchise. So they aren't just going to end it after the Final Shape. They're going to keep things going. I would imagine they're probably just going to see it probably depends what the player base is like, what the numbers are like, what the purchases are like. Of course, end of the day, this is a business. Their goal is to make money as well as make cool games, entertain people. They're also a business, not a charity. So they are trying to make money. So if Destiny's financially viable, of course they're going to keep that going. And I would imagine they would just keep releasing more small expansions, seasons, maybe like an expansion every 2 years or something. But you would imagine they would probably put their focuses on other games they're working on, this Matter codename, or maybe other games they'll start working on full general. But we know they also want to be a multi-game studio. They want to be kind of like Blizzard and have these, lots of franchises. And Destiny is clearly that. So they've got their pretty much World of Warcraft. So you'd imagine they would want to continue that and not just cut it at the Final Shape. But yeah, it's good to know things are definitely going to continue.
You know what, as well? I think that it'd be ridiculous for them to not put the amount of gas that they've put into Destiny thus far into more of it. Because, this universe still has lots of stories to tell.
Oh, yeah.
From visiting the worlds of other alien races, like going to Toro Battle and visiting the Cabal, to understanding the nature of the Scions, to understanding what the Aphelion are, to figuring out what the hell happened in that one planet where the Drifter went, which is just all darkness creatures. Even, going ahead and potentially seeing, I don't know, maybe the solar system gets blown up or some nonsense, and then basically we turn into a roving migrant fleet. There are stories, even back in the Books of Sorrow, talking about alien races we've never seen or heard of. And so it's one of these things of like, if you really want to flesh the universe of Destiny out and make it as broad and crazy as you want, you can go wherever the hell you like. I mean, Destiny is a universe in which effectively Space Rivendell happened when survivors of a spaceship that crashed inside a black hole and, returned after more than several million years, came along and decided to build a city in the asteroid belt, specifically where it was hidden. I mean, this stuff is absolutely nonsense, and it's brilliant for it.
They've got a lot of room.
Destiny is that place where you can have the Iron Lords, right? Literal knights in shining armor, alongside Siva, literal nanotechnology capable of enhancing and, creating practically whatever you want. And you can put those in the same expansion and it makes sense. You can sit there and you can put crazy nonsense into Destiny and it will work because it's just broad enough. It is science fantasy at its best.
Yeah, the versatility of the Destiny franchise is they have a limitless supply of things to touch on, and of course the movies they want to make. They want to make, is it TV show as well or just movies? Their plans.
I honestly don't know, but I know that movie was discussed at one point.
Yeah, so. They can make a whole game or a whole film just off the Books of Sorrows or just off of the Dark Age or just before the Traveler or the Golden Age. There are so many points in Destiny's timeline that you could make entire games or films or TV shows, Netflix series, you name it. But like we said, Bungie definitely aren't going to be killing Destiny anytime soon. They've built nearly a decade, built such a big franchise. They're definitely going to keep it going. But it's got a lot of potential. Yeah.
Shameless plug, I will admit, but I wouldn't know at all what it's like making an entire movie out of the Books of Sorrow.
Yeah, you seem to be familiar in these big grand projects.
Just a wee bit, I've heard of it every once in a while. I think I heard some guy talk about it on Reddit. Yeah.
How's that going? You're making a grand epic masterpiece in typical Byf fashion. We know Byf at least once a year. You can definitely count on him to make some kind of grand project that he spends a considerable amount of time on and always does considerably well. So it's always worth it. But you're working on a new one, which will be out before Witch Queen.
Yeah, doing 3D animation for the first time on this one, which is really exciting because we get to take the most epic bits of the story and actually make it look like it's a cutscene in Destiny.
Yeah, I watched your episode 1 and it was like this. It looks like you're making a game. Like the way, I mean, the amount that goes into it. 3D animation and all the graphics and like it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's good to see.
It's real exciting. I will share one bit with you because. You know what? I run the project. Screw it. I can talk about it. We are currently in the process of animating one of we've got about 10 scenes or so that are going to be animated in this. And the scene that is currently being worked on by our animators is a scene where it's basically just after the Hive have left their home world behind for good, have left Fundament, and Oryx, who at this time is Oryx, and Xivu Arath and Savathun are trying to test their powers and trying to become more powerful as they prepare for war. And so they conduct what is referred to as 10,000 years of war. And the idea is basically we're going to have the craziest Hive versus Hive fight you've ever seen.
Sounds like a wild time.
And it's going to be... Oh, man. Some of the ideas...
10,000 years of war.
Some of the ideas that were thrown around for it just make me so excited. It's like, we can do that. We can animate that. That's like, yeah, we can animate this happening to this, and it's like, yeah, it's the kind of thing that gives me nerd chills, man. I'm very excited.
No, it's good to see. I mean, you're bringing to life, and who better than you? You know what you're doing, obviously. So it's just good to be able to you can bring to life and visually because. you know, there's so many good stories in Destiny, but they're only in text. So it's good to be able to see visual versions and just to get, you know, actual fans of the game and the amount of artists and people that you're working with to be able to bring this together and make something for the fans of the game, to be able to just enjoy something that Bungie probably aren't going to do, and just to be able to animate it and, you know, just to kind of bring that to life visually is yeah, it's always impressive. And it's always just impressive just to see you work on big projects and long term. It's always nice to have like a big project to just whittle at day by day, and something that's going to come to fruition in, you know, delayed gratification, just something you can work on that, you know, in the future will pay off.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage, but it's real cool.
Yeah.
Shameless plug over. My apologies.
All good. I mean, you're working hard. Absolutely deserve it. Absolutely. But there was a big announcement: the return of a semi-well-known exotic. Kind of you know, some would say technically one of the most famous weapons in gaming history. Like you see it in like even like PlayStation trailers and just like memes, and the thing is famous. The G-Horn.
That's right. Oh, damn. Sorry, I thought we were going to talk about Drake's Promise. Damn, okay, sorry.
No, Telesto.
Telesto.
That, to be honest, that does need its own. That needs its own one as well. No, but the G-Horn, the infamous G-Horn. Well, let's be honest. We all knew it was coming back. We all knew it was only a matter of time. Like I think most of us knew that there was a whiteboard somewhere where Bungie had, and you can tell they just had G-Horn. They were just saving it for a time of like, when's the best time to use the G-Horn card? Oh, let's drop it. But it's pretty clever because they're doing it for the Bungie 30th anniversary, which is in December, right? Yes. So that'll be kind of like that's basically like a midpoint mini DLC in between now and Witch Queen, which is going to be a very, very long 6 months. But it's pretty good timing, and it you know, obviously capitalized on the holiday season as touching on the business side of things. Game developers, it's in their best interest to, I mean, anyone in the entertainment industry, money is always up in the Q4, so it's definitely in your best interest to do something. So it makes sense, as it's the half point in between, to kind of fill the drought, because it is going to be we've got quite a long wait until Witch Queen, so it's good to have something to fill in. But G-Horn is a part of that. So yeah, what is it, the 30th anniversary, big Bungie celebration, some lost sectors,
tons of cosmetics. But the funniest thing I think of the whole bunch is just they decided to go full meme with it, because not only are they bringing back Gjallarhorn and all that good stuff, but also they have a new dungeon coming along, which of course is set in the loot cave, which is just, I mean, it's so hilarious that they decided to go ahead and do that, because it's just, what else, you know? Like, of all the infamous locations in Destiny's history, you just know that it's going to be like, the end boss is going to be like the Spectre of Rahul, and, you know, 1 million deaths are not going to be enough, and that's going to be like the name of a debuff. Oh, dude. There's going to be so many Easter eggs.
It's yeah, I mean a whole dungeon. I was expecting, like, back when they first did the Cosmodrome, thinking, oh, it'd be cool if there's like a lost sector in there. But no, they've gone full on a whole dungeon. I wonder what the boss of that's going to be like.
Oh my god, I really just I do hope they fully embrace all of the memes with it. You know, like I really hope that it's. You know, you could do some nonsense where it's like a chasm of like terrible memories of powerful things going on. And, you know, you could round the corner and you could be trapped in this terrible Cabal's embrace. And you just look and you realize that you're back in Cerberus Bay 3 and you hear Zavala in the background. He's saying whether we wanted it or not. You've stepped into a war with the Cabal.
I really hope they bring that meme more into the game in some fashion. I just hope there's a bunch of like just a bunch of acolytes running, and like every single one of them drops like a green engram or a blue engram, even if it's just like trash loot. They should do that, which every single acolyte drops a blue, so there's just blue engrams all over the floor.
Or you have a cryptoc you visit midway through, and you can take your legendaries, and they will turn into greens.
I want to see Rahul in there. Rahul better be in there. Yeah, back in the day, a lot of
he's going to be the final boss. He's going to be the final boss. That's the way it's going to be.
A lot of you new Destiny players might not even remember there was such a time where, what was it? Legendaries could decrypt into blues. Could blues go into greens?
Oh, legendaries could go into greens.
Oh yeah, they could go all the way down to greens.
Yeah. Yep.
Imagine having a legendary, and this again, back in the day when a purple engram was a very big deal. Not now, oh yeah, I'm just flooded with legendaries and primes and umbrals and all this like just nonsense clogging up my inventory. Back in the day when a legendary engram was like a cause for celebration. Imagine turning that in, thinking this is going to be what's going to get me that piece of loot or upper level, and it's a green.
Yep.
I think that lasted like a week or two. Then they like patched it. I remember that. Where they're like, purple engrams can no longer downgrade. They are what they are because RNG was.
I still remember the patch note meme that they included as a prelude to that, which is that Cade 6 walked over to Master Rahul and showed him a sack full of doorknobs, and Rahul has gotten the point. Legendary engrams will no longer decrypt into blues or greens. It's just like, whoa, what? Quality of life. God, like.
What do you think the Gjallarhorn's going to be like in terms of, will it live up to its reputation, the Wolfpack grounds? Can it, I mean, in this sandbox, can it, you know, how's it going to stack up to Xenophage? And it's going to have to be pretty impressive.
So I think the way they're going to go ahead and handle this, I think that Wolfpack rounds are going to work in a similar way to Explosive Payload, where most of the damage is split between either the Wolfpack rounds or the main explosion of the rocket. And so it's roughly the same as a normal rocket. I think that the other thing is going to be, you get your tracking again as you did before, and you get 2 in the mag. I think that's how it's going to be. Because they'll want to make sure that it's balanced and comparable to other legendary options. And with something like, say, Overflow, you can actually make it so that you're getting 2 in the mag again with a legendary. And so having those Wolfpack rounds to slightly eat out more of the damage and to slightly burn through more adds, if they're just seeking projectiles as they were before that will then go ahead and find enemies, you're going to have a rocket launcher there that's just better than its legendary counterparts by default, and that kind of fills in its exoticness. And as a result, I mean, Overflow and a rocket launcher for DPS is a huge deal. So, like, that's probably going to translate as well into a slightly slower reload, but I mean, we got mods for that. It's, I predict it being powerful, but I mean, let's put it this way. Deathbringer might still do more. You're probably going to look at similar or comparable DPS when you're using Lament over a long period of time. The entire thing is really going to depend on where the game is at. And it's not immune from nerfs, just like it was back in the day, like, you still very much may have something where it gets hit. You would hope it's going to
be better than Deathbringer, for sure. I mean, very similar to Deathbringer, so they would have to definitely make it better. I mean, I would imagine, I feel like this is kind of a one-off where it's almost like they're allowed to make it ridiculously OP. Like, it kind of has to. Like, this is literally one of the most famous weapons in, like, gaming. Forget Destiny. This thing is so, like, when it returns, if people are saying, yeah, it's okay, that's not going to go, it has to live up to, it's literally the most hyped weapon ever. It's become a meme. Talking about bringing it back.
They have released it 3 times. It's that powerful, like, this will be time number 3.
It has to be good. It has to, but, I have faith that it will. Pretty much all the exotics they release these days are pretty good. Like, Hawk Moon and Mytho, well, now it's good. But, you would imagine Bungie aren't going to want to release that and have people say, yeah, it's okay. But there are also people, of course, unhappy that it is technically behind a paywall. You do have to...
and a big one at that in comparison.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much like a mini DLC. The what is it, $20, $25, $30?
Yeah, $25. I see people's complaint with regards to the amount that they're getting with it, like, it is a very special kind of pack considering the kind of time it's celebrating. But when we're used to now getting a couple of exotics, lots of story, 2 seasonal activities, one of which is like 6-player match made, one of which is Fireteam based, and a whole bunch of other stuff and seasonal events going on for $10 every season, $25 for a lot of cosmetics, an exotic, 2 legendaries, and a dungeon is a pretty tricky sell. But if they were going to go ahead and make anything to sell it, it was definitely going to be the Gjallarhorn. It's the, I think it was Griffin, who is one of the people who runs Bungie's Twitter. It was either Griffin or it was Nicole. I'm not sure which Bungie employee it was, but they tweeted out that the highest performing tweet that they had on the day, or one of the highest performing tweets they had on the day, was the tweet for Gjallarhorn is returning.
Interesting.
Like,
Makes sense.
This weapon is
Famous.
absurd. It creates its own trending. You know, like nothing else I know does that. It's kind of silly. It's kind of ridiculous. And frankly, I am sitting here in this place of like, if they're just trying to make their buck, I get that from this particular instance, because you know you're throwing Gjallarhorn at it. At that point, you are literally throwing the kitchen sink.
Like I said, it's a button. They're waiting for it. It was only a matter of time where they're like, when are we gonna drop the Gjallarhorn button? You know, break glass in case of
need for selling copies of something.
And they are gonna sell some copies. And again, like I said, it's not a coincidence. This is happening in December, the possibly the most profitable month of the year as far as the whole entertainment industry. So you know, they know what they're doing in terms of marketing and the business side of things. Make no mistake. But
yes.
So we've got that, and then there's dungeons in those. They said we're getting a new dungeon or raid every 3 months, and they plan on bringing back a Destiny 1 raid, which would
I can't imagine what Oryx raid that will be.
Yeah, King's Fall seems like it's the most likely candidate. Yeah, especially with Witch Queen and Savathun, and it just would kind of make sense. King's Fall, or there's also Wrath. Don't think anyone's really taking Crota too seriously. Although didn't they say that they kind of want to bring it back as a dungeon? Or
yeah, I think that's what they said.
I saw that a while ago. They said they were open to it or considering it.
Yeah, it is a more dungeon-sized experience in terms of everything. And honestly, man, 3 men in Crota nowadays with the arsenal of power that we have, not at all impossible. Like, honestly, not impossible whatsoever. Yeah. You sit there and you think about the boss encounter, yeah, absolutely. You could probably solo sides if you're looking at something like Yut. The bridge encounter might be a little bit trickier, but, you know, you can simplify that, or you can have certain mechanics work in certain ways. Honestly, I really do feel like if you're going to go ahead and make any single raid into a dungeon, absolutely, it was going to be Crota's End.
Plus, they already have the room is already in Destiny 2. It was in the Nightmares in Shadowkeep. Yeah. So, assets wise and that, you know, development wise, these things are important in terms of having room for stuff. So they have already technically the boss area is already in Destiny 2. They just need to build the rest of it. So I would imagine
they already have Crota too.
Yeah,
because he's a Nightmare as well.
Yeah, so it's not too much of a stretch to imagine they'll probably bring that back as some kind of dungeon experience. But as far as the raid, you would imagine it would be King's Fall, which is a very long raid, very one of the biggest. But also Wrath Machine does have a special place in my heart. That is one of my favorite. You know,
it's
in my personal
raid,
opinion,
honestly.
I would prefer it to. It's between that or Vault of Glass as far as my favorite raid of all time. But I also give Wrath a lot of props because it wasn't the first one. Like Vogue obviously was special because it's the first, and it was also very good. But Wrath for just being just in the middle. I guess it was it Destiny 1's last raid?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was the final raid.
So very impressive of them to make such a good raid at one of their, you know, just at the very end of the game's life cycle. But Wrath is, you know, another Fallen is just Wrath is a very, very, very good raid. But thematically, would probably make sense for them to do King's Fall.
Also, I don't know how much of the mechanics behind King's Fall really need to be edited in order to make it viable. You know, Datto was sitting here and making this exact point. In fact, he said maybe you make changes to War Priest and a few changes to Gjallarhorn so that you can't do the sort of easier method to Gjallarhorn, and so you have to multi-orbit instead of one-orbing it. But, you know, as far as Oryx is concerned for boss fight, yeah, go for it, you know.
Although I would kind of like to see, I think Gjallarhorn is one of my favorite encounters of all raids. I think it's such a good, when everything works properly, it's such a good, it's one of those encounters that just feels satisfying to do when you get, you know, 6 people together to coordinate and you kind of rotate like the clock and shoot his crit spot and shoot the orbs. Like Gjallarhorn's I always liked that encounter. But I do think Oryx, I was never really too fond on even just the damage phase of Oryx. The fact that you're technically not even damaging him, you're just damage, like the ogres are the boss of the Oryx. That was always a thing. Like the ogres are technically the boss and the orbs, but you're not technically, you know, you want to shoot the bad guy. You want to feel like you're damaging him and not just shooting an Oba and then standing in an orb and then he just like loses the core of his health. Like, so I would like to see something maybe tweaked around Oryx so it's more of a boss encounter, but I'd be fine either way. But just a tiny gripe if I was to add one.
Yeah, can't help but agree on that particular front, but I feel as though there's there's different ways in which they can do that. In knowing Destiny 2 and the way that they edited Vault of Glass to make Atheon tough as nails in the last encounter with all the supplicants, because I mean it's a lot of supplicants. I bet you that you could look at a thing where every single time you proc a series of bombs, you then have to cancel a something at the front by just dumping a ton of damage into Oryx's chest. Like that to me would make the most sense. Just he does his he does his big doxology attack where he goes ahead and claps his hands in a far more menacing way than Callus ever did. And,
I was thinking of Callus when you did that little.
Oh man, yeah. I tell you, back in the day, we didn't have raid bosses that clapped us and sent us into another plane. They clapped and you died. Like that's as simple as it was, man. It was a wipe.
I miss Callus. Poor Callus.
And then everyone self-resed. It's fine.
Shout out to Callus.
Yeah. Hope Callus is still doing well. Oh wait.
Yeah, not looking good upon that Glycon.
Yeah.
What do we think about these? Obviously, we're getting the light subclasses reworked, but obviously, notably, there is the absence of a new element or subclass, which most of us were expecting. Some kind of thorn, corruption, poison, green element. I don't think technically promised there would be a new one with each subclass, but it did seem like Bungie intended to add the poison greeny element with Witch Queen, but obviously now they're not. So that was probably one of the only things missing as far as like things that we kind of assumed would have been in the expansion, and obviously would have been a very good thing to have. A whole new element is obviously very good, as much as stasis is very controversial. We were definitely expecting it, but it seems we're getting instead, and it probably makes sense with them adding the final shape for them to just give more time to work on those subclasses so that maybe we don't get the same problems as stasis. And in the meantime, we're going to get the light subclasses reworked, starting with Void. And then, so you would imagine we'd get the new elements with Lightfall and the final shape. But what do you think about the lack of a new subclass / element?
I think honestly, considering exactly what you just said, where Lightfall and Final Shape might have darkness subclasses, I feel like this makes all the sense in the world. I imagine the story justification is also going to be the Lucent Hive that we've killed have shown us that we can use the light in new terrible ways. Should we use this power? I suppose we don't have a choice, And it's going to be the justification for it. So it makes perfect sense from a narrative standpoint that this is what they do. Also, I mean, it was going to happen at some point that we, reworked all the light subclasses.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is as good a point as any.
It wouldn't make sense to double up.
Yeah, exactly. You're sitting here with the ability to update the entirety of the game and breathe life into some subclasses that have... I don't want to say the subclass trees have been a problem since Destiny 2 Vanilla, because especially with Forsaken and especially with Armor 2.0 and all the mods that we had added, and the way that you can actually competently craft a build nowadays, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be in D2 Vanilla. But there's still that slight looming shadow over all of it where you basically have to sit there and say, hey, this still isn't quite perfect. This still feels somewhat limited in comparison to Stasis, which is just customizable to a point of extremes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if you're really looking into all of this, you can kind of sit here and you should really expect that, that was going to happen. And again, if you have 2 seasons which are very likely to rotate around the darkness as a theme in its core, then it only makes sense that in 2 years and 3 years from now, we will be wielding darkness subclasses, That's going to be, I think, the way that everything goes.
Yeah, I think especially coming from, what you're saying about the light subclasses being a little bit just seeming a bit antiquated, especially, I don't know if antiquated is the word, just not customizable, not very not very player intuitive. It doesn't give much choice, especially coming from Destiny 1, where of course you could customize subclasses. You could literally pick and choose perks, what you want. You could adjust things. And then when it's Destiny 2, I never ever really understood the cluster system of the light subclass. It always seemed very strange, just because the way they give you 4 perks, it's kind of like, what's the point in showing the perks if you can't choose? It's kind of like, just like, here are your 4 perks, but it's like, I can't choose them, so you might as well just give me these perks. Like, it kind of gives you the illusion as if you can choose and customize, but it's like, no, you just pick this cluster or this cluster. So it just never really made much sense. And especially, you know, seeing the darkness, the stasis subclass, the full customization of that, it definitely makes the light subclasses seem very antiquated, because it's just like, here's your cluster of 4 perks, which most of the time only about 2 or 3 of them you actually use. The other one is just kind of there. If you had a choice, you would probably pick and choose and customize, and there's always one from one class that you wish you could have, and the other one from the other. So it's just, and especially with the like Night Stalker, for example, there was always options for like smoke bomb grenades and like invisibility duration, which you wish you could have the perk from that tree added with that tree. But it's just, it always just seems strange, the fact they give you these 4 perks, but you can't change or customize. It's kind of like, there's not really much point in showing me these because I don't have a choice. It's just, I have to take them whatever you say, so there's not really much point displaying them as if there is a choice. So I think the overhaul is going to be much needed for those.
I don't know about you, but what irked me was way back when we played the Destiny 2 beta, they had the system by which the subclasses were just a wee bit different, and you could only ever play the one Warlock one at that particular point in time, which was... actually, no, I was thinking of the ones at Gamescom where we played Dawnblade. And the thing that irks me is, for that brief moment at Gamescom, I was able to experience Destiny 2 with a Dawnblade subclass that had the movement ability of both bottom and top tree, where I could do Phoenix Dive and Icarus Dash. And I'm sitting here now playing Destiny 2, and it has still always, to this day, irked me that I cannot use both. And it's one of those things of, if we're going to see all of these aspects and fragments get added, and if we're going to see real perk choices get brought into Destiny 2, I would love to see things like that get added into the customization, you know? I would happily trade off a perk or so on bottom tree Dawnblade if I could switch it out for a perk on top tree. You know, I'd very happily switch up the melees on my different trees so that I could work all of that stuff in. I'd happily go ahead and sacrifice Dawnblade stuff if I was looking to do that specifically, so that I could go ahead and make a core melee focused build, you know? And have something where it's like, hey, I can have the like ranged spaghetti melee, but I can also make dudes explode with it, like on bottom tree, you know? Or maybe give myself a damage buff instead, like on middle tree, you know? Like, choice is always a good thing, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what it goes down to.
It'll, obviously, not as good as a whole new subclass, but it definitely will freshen things up a bit to be able to, because if they do it similar to how Stasis set up, it would, you know, let you, it would be almost like, I don't say new subclasses, but it would be the biggest refresh in terms of all of those that we've ever seen, in terms of being able to have a perk that you've always wanted. Now you can add it, and now you can have this aspect, and also, of course, there'll be fragments and other, hopefully, new things that makes things change in other ways. I don't feel sorry for the balancing team. I'm sure they're going to have a lot more work because, again, all the variables and possibilities when you do that open way up. So in terms of things that can break and things that can have bad interactions are going to go way up. But as the player, you know, we're not concerned with that. The player, all we want is choice and the ability to play how we want. So it's, it will be good. Obviously, disappointing to not get a whole new element, but it also would seem a bit like, you know, the thought of getting a new, even though Witch King is delayed, getting a new element and subclass every year, that did seem like a lot. So again, not glad it's delayed by any means, but you know, it is what it is. We'll hopefully the next 2 expansions will have dark, but you would imagine, obviously we know they're going to add more, but it's just in the meantime, we'll just focus on the light
matter of time. Also, I think the last thing to touch on this is, I hope that they've heard the community backlash about removing supers. You know, because it's one of these things of, when they rework the subclasses, they have a choice to get rid of things like Nova Warp and to collapse, you know, Solar Warlock, for example, into either Well of Radiance or Dawnblade, or Solar Titan into big hammer or little hammer, you know? Like it's very much about, you know, some classes will have the same identity with this kind of stuff, and maybe they could expand it. Like imagine Arc Hunter having Arc Blade come back and having that perform differently from Arc Staff. You know, those are changes that you could make. But there's core identities in lots of Destiny's subclass trees now that people really, really home in on.
Yeah.
Especially with the supers. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, there's an exotic that I've always stuck with ever since it's released, and that's been Phoenix Protocol, because it's just that good. And it also classifies the exact kind of player I want to be. And, you know, to top it off, it all looks great. And that all revolves around Well of Radiance existing. You know, and it's kind of this very troubling point of, if this no longer exists, what am I going to do? You know, you kind of kill a lot of players' core fantasies if you get rid of some supers. And doing so is very dangerous. It's dangerous in fact, I'd say it's more dangerous than sunsetting. Because guns were getting changed out all the time, but subclasses are part of the core class identity, you know, like... Yeah, they got to touch that one with the deftest of hands and make sure nothing feels...
It sounded complex and messy when they alluded to it, and you know they got a lot of pushback, rightfully so, because it definitely was like well, hang on, like you're going to be getting rid of stuff, like you're going to get rid of Nova Warp, or like what are you going to get rid of these things? And also you got to think like the exotics that are designed for those. What's going to happen to those? Like it's a very, like I say with Destiny, it's a very, very messy, complex game. But yeah, getting rid of things like that, it would feel like almost sunsetting subclasses at that point, pretty much.
Absolutely, yeah, and yeah, not a popular move whatsoever.
Speaking of an area of the game which often has unpopular decisions,
here we go.
The Crucible.
Hey.
Our old check-in on our buddy, the Crucible. So there wasn't really, as far as like core Crucible, was there really any announcements? I mean, obviously Iron Banner and Trials, but in terms of the core Crucible, was there much? Not from the reveal. I mean, it was revealed a few weeks back in that long thread.
I want to say it was Joe Blackburn who made this thread, but I can't be 100% sure. But it was revealed that we'd be getting some iteration of Rift in development.
Yeah.
As well as new maps coming at some point during which
the remade map.
You know, and that's not much consolation for the PvP guys now, because, you know, they still have 6 months to wait before they get anything. But it is one of these things of like, hey, you know, we're not done with this. We're still working on this. Stuff is still going. And then the stuff from the Witch Queen announcement was really about Trials. You know, and they published a massive blog post on that recently on bungie.net too. So yeah, there's a lot of detail on that now.
Reworking the loot system, reworking the matchmaking, solo matchmaking, a lot of excessive, obviously, you know, loot system and the reward systems, but I think more importantly, the accessibility, that's key, because yeah, there's definitely a lot of accessibility problems when it comes to Trials, and I think one of the biggest things that would help it out above a lot of the, you know, a lot of the gameplay features would just be accessibility. Get more people into the mode, get more people playing it, make it a thing that, because I see the majority of people don't even touch the playlist. They don't even want to. And I'm talking about not like the hardcore sweat people who obviously live in that mode, but they are the minority. You got to think about the majority of people that play Destiny, the very just casual players. They don't want to step foot in Trials. They don't even want to think about the mode. They wouldn't even, and I read the comments and tweets and I see them. They're just like, oh, I wouldn't even dream of playing Trials. So we need to get those people into the mode and those people playing it. But obviously it's a balance between not just making it easy and watered down, but also not making it inaccessible, which has also been. So it needs to be a balance of, again, I don't envy the people whose job it is to try and figure stuff out, but a balance of making it more something that the casual player wants to jump into more, but also not watered down, which we've also that's also been a huge problem for Trials, has been watering it down and making it too easy and just no rewards and having the lighthouse loot be just like cosmetic. That's not a good move at all. So you need to make it rewarding, but also accessible, which is, again, glad it's not my job to be able to think of that stuff, but hopefully they can get it right.
Yeah. And there's some changes over here, some of which hurt access, but overall I think it's definitely going to improve the number of players in the player base. The thing that hurts access is actually something that I completely agree with. I think you will agree with too, which is Trials of Osiris is now going to require the annual expansion to play.
Yeah, that's
a
very
big
good
deal
point.
because before this it was free to play.
That's big.
Yeah, which means that free accounts would be able to jump in, get to the required light level after having grinded just a wee bit, and then after all that's said and done, you can jump in, use whatever cheats and hacks you've got, go ahead, I don't know, maybe even carry a friend to Flawless if that was how you were so inclined. And, you know, after that's said and done, your account's a burner, so you don't care. You've done the other thing, that's fine. Now it's actually going to require you to pay, so it's going to be much more expensive for people to do. And obviously people will still do it, but it's a big leap up. It's much less easy for someone to just go in and get a random account.
One of those paywalls that a lot of people have been saying for a long time that is much needed, because it'll basically just wean out a lot of the hackers, cheaters, just make it a lot harder for them to just mess up the mode, which is also something else I didn't mention, is also another problem with Trials, is the hackers, I guess mainly on PC, but the hackers, the cheaters, when getting into a game and getting your loot and winning isn't even the problem. It's like going into a game and just getting stomped by people that can just fly around the map and shoot infinite mountaintops and just destroy your whole team. So that the cheaters and hackers aspect's another thing, but the paywall's big, so you now have to own the yearly expansion, which now would be Beyond Light, and then with Witch Queen will be Witch Queen. But you have to own that in order to get into Trials, which will be, again, good for the player pool. The health of the mode should be a lot better with that. But Trials is getting a lot of is getting new guns and a couple new features. But the main things are just the
too, right?
So what was that?
The reward changes too.
How you get the loot
on that front. Yeah, the fact that it's now tracking wins by rounds instead of wins by games is actually huge, because you sit there and you realize that if you play a game out to completion, a 4-5 win for one team or a 4-5 loss for another is actually not a terrible outcome anymore. You're sitting there and you may have lost the match, but if you won 4 rounds, you've won 4 rounds, and that's worth loot. That's a big deal. It means that those close games are good for everyone, and if you do have those really competitive ones, that's fantastic, frankly.
Again,
the other I think the other thing, I was talking with Barb on this on stream, but now there's a new way that they're doing matchmaking with regards to things.
Right.
I'm just reading over this now, but basically it's a here's the other thing. You now start matchmaking with players that have the same number of wins on the card and with a similar Trials game performance of that given week. And the of that given week thing is the important thing.
Yeah, that's new.
It resets every week, which is honestly, I don't understand how hard that is or how tricky that was to implement, but that's a huge deal. Because if you sit there and you have stuff that resets every single week, it means that at the very beginning, you go back to what is effectively, an easier card for someone who's very skilled that will then, gradually level out to something that's harder. But if you're not that great, if you stick with it for the first few games, it's going to lower things down to your skill level, and it's going to make it more possible to get more wins and potentially to even go flawless. So this is really the best of both worlds, Sweat players will no longer be in this place where they're sitting there and, battling it out against Crucible gods every single time for their first card, just so they can get flawless. But by that same token, you have players that are going to be able to persist and grind every week, and they're going to be able to actually get it if they're not that great. And even if they don't go flawless, the loot system and the rewards are better too, because again, it's now based on rounds, not matches. These are really good changes. These are fantastic.
Like I said, it's all about accessibility is very key. We need things that just keep the average and most of the player base interested in playing the mode and not thinking, it's not worth my time, it's too sweaty, there's just it's if I lose one match, it's not worth my time. So we need to, that's definitely the mindset in terms of making it, the tough balance of making it worthwhile and more rewarding and getting something, not like participation trophies, but just worth your time, but also not watering it down, and having high level stuff for the sweats and people that can go to the lighthouse, making it worth them wanting to play. But I mean, contrasting back to when it launched earlier this year, it was very, very different. It was the entire just loot system, and wasn't the adept weapons. It's come a long way, but like Bungie said, it is their main pinnacle Crucible mode. So they definitely seem invested in trying to keep it alive, and also doing things like the 3 peaking, fixing that, which is going to be good. Doing the paywall, obviously very good. The crossplay, that's going to be massive in terms of the entire Crucible PvE as well, but mainly for Crucible, that's just going to just widen the player base, have a wider pool of people to pick from, so matchmaking should be better, and it won't just be so just kind of lopsided and everyone's just so isolated. So crossplay is going to be very, very good for the health of the game.
Absolutely.
How do you think crossplay is going from what you've seen?
I mean, there've been a few bugs about sending friend requests on day one, which, you know, made people crash. But I mean, it's day one stuff that's bound to happen. And honestly, I had a longtime buddy of mine called Stuart, aka Receptor, and he has been in Peasant Guard for years and years now. He's a really good friend. And he jumped in on my fire team the other day when I was just casually going to the EDZ so I could get something from Trostland. I think it was the new Ascended Anchors. And the amazing thing about that is he's an Xbox player. And he has been divided from the rest of the clan for years. And, you know, for the longest time it was the case of we're going to get him a PlayStation. We did eventually get him a PlayStation so he could play with us. And then Shadowkeep happened and everyone moved to PC. Now there is no division. That alone in itself is kind of incredible, because the amount of bonds that people have been able to reignite and the amount of friendships that I've seen celebrated through crossplay, it has a very different kind of feeling, you know. Destiny now feels like the game it should have been, as far as being able to play where you want, with whoever you want. And I genuinely do feel really excited about this idea that I could sit down on a sofa and go ahead and pick up a controller at the end of the day, and I wouldn't need to be at my work PC, but I could still just chill and play some Destiny. And I could still have my 60 FPS experience. I could still play with someone who's on PC. I could still jump in and do Crucible with them if I really wanted. And yeah, this is the strange, really weird dream that I think Destiny players are just waking up to, and it feels a bit surreal. I don't know about you, dude, but you know, just seeing people on the roster and then seeing the little Xbox symbol next to them, or the Steam symbol, or the Stadia symbol, because we have one or two of those in PG. You know, it's totally weird to me in like the wackiest, most wonderful way possible.
I mean, Destiny at its core is one of the most social games out there. It's like the social is what all the Bungie leadership always praise about the game. The social elements is absolutely the bread and butter of Destiny. Obviously, it's a great game, but what makes it what has made it what it is today are the social features, the raiding, the fact that it kind of forces and requires you to communicate with other people, and it makes the game so much better than just like playing by yourself. It's not a very solo friendly game, as we all know, and it's so much better. It's obviously playable and very good solo, but it's infinitely better when you have people. So, and yeah, and like you said, with Shadowkeep, a lot of like I myself, most of us moved to PC just simply because, you know, it just looks so much ridiculously better. But obviously it did definitely fragment, like my friends list just dwindled so much because you used to play all the time on PlayStation. And so it's good to just have the, it's just, you know, in the year 2021, it's nice to see games as a whole just going into this kind of crossplay, and the platforms don't have this kind of, I don't want to say greedy, but just like hyper competitive, like us versus them. Like, it's nice to see the platforms playing ball a little bit more. I think Fortnite was, I think it's kind of a fact, Fortnite was kind of instrumental to that, in terms of the game was so ridiculously big, it forced all the platforms, because Sony and Microsoft obviously didn't, I think it was more on the Sony side as well, weren't very open to crossplay. I think Sony, like back in the day, were, but then Xbox weren't. But then when Sony got the leg up, and with this PS4, Xbox One generation, because they had they sold more, they didn't want to share with Xbox, because they didn't want to share their player base with what they saw as the smaller one, which would be being Xbox. But Fortnite forced their hand by being so big and such of a huge game. They were like, if you don't add this, this is just a detriment to the entire just gaming as a whole, and the biggest game in the world is going to suffer if you don't. So they kind of forced the hand to make crossplay a normal thing, and since then you've just seen more and more games it's just a normal thing. Like again, back in the day, back in a time that we remember very well, it was the idea of crossplay, playing with someone on a different platform, was alien. Imagine a PlayStation player playing with an Xbox player. It's just like never going to happen. So the fact that it's normal now is so nice to see. And we got cross save back with was it Shadowkeep when they got cross save?
You know, it reminds me of the craziest cross save story I heard, which is they got confirmation from Sony that they would allow cross save through PS4, and they got it something like
the night before,
2 days or 24 hours prior or something like that, because Bungie said, if you don't agree to this, we're going to launch it, and we're going to effectively, they said, we'll lay the blame at the feet of who it's meant to be laid at, which is yours.
Yeah.
Because literally it was a case of Sony just dragging their feet, as was the case with a lot of things. You know, with Rocket League, they sat there and their literal quote was, we will do it, we just need Sony's permission to literally pull the lever, to push the button. Like it's built out, it's ready, it's capable of happening. We just need Sony to say yes. And it's hilarious to see them buckle under the weight of some of these franchises with their player bases and say like, okay, fine, we'll do it, but only because you forced our hand, you know? And now that we're in this generation of crossplay, I think that we're actually going to look so much better for it. Because for one, you know, when you can play with your friends and you're sitting there and you're all having the same fun experience, you care a whole lot less about what platform someone's playing on. You know? Like, I think it's going to be less about console wars, which has never been about like healthy video game companies having competition. It's more about toxic, obnoxious fan bases.
Yeah.
But also,
very much.
If companies now want players to buy their hardware, you know, the PlayStation 4 or 5 or whatever it's going to be next, the Xbox One or Xbox Series X or whatever it's going to be next, something from Nintendo, something from Google on the Stadia side, Lord forbid that we get something new on that front, you know, we are going to be looking at a very interesting place where suddenly the game companies have to, I don't know, build hardware that's got good games on it if they want me to play. You know, I'm still waiting for a game on my PS5 that's going to make me pull it out and play it regularly. You know, I have a lot of hope for some of their upcoming titles, but you know, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself like, okay, there's nothing immediately now that makes me want to play it, you know? Like, Miles Morales maybe, but that's it. That's it. Like,
there's
not much else. There's almost nothing else.
I mean, as is the case with a lot of business and just enterprise, the competition is good for the consumer. It's good for us, the end users. So us playing the game and just, it's in our best interest. Obviously, the companies don't like it because it makes them have to, okay, now we have to play ball with these other companies that we didn't really want to. But as players, we all have a much better experience. We all get to play with, doesn't matter whether it's on a PC or Xbox or Stadia or your PSP, whatever you're playing on, you can just hop on and just play that's all that matters, just play the game. It always used to be such an obstacle. Like I remember in school, just it would always be the case of, I mean, pretty much almost everyone in my year played on PS3. And there are a few people that played on Xbox, but it was always that kind of division separation. And again, that's where I come from. That thought of just like the idea of those two playing together is almost alien. But it's just nice to see, again, for the end user, for us, it's just a win-win. I'm sure the companies don't like that because it forces them to have to be, now that it's all, the platform doesn't matter. Now all that matters is the game. And also there's no game exclusives anymore, which is also very good for us. It's just a case of just let the best game win. It's just a pure just meritocracy of just, doesn't matter the platform. Let's just make a good game, make it playable, and doesn't matter what platform, what physical piece of plastic and metal you choose to play it on. Just make a good game and let us play it with our friends and stop with all the console wars and competition and platform this and exclusives, and just let the marketplace dictate what we want. And yeah, like I said, Fortnite was a great example of that. It was just so big and huge, it just forced the entire industry to change, which was very interesting, I thought.
And brings it back to the most important thing about video games, which always should be, are you having fun? You know, like, is this satisfying to you?
Yeah, your time is valuable, and you've got to be spending it well, especially in this day and age when there's a billion distractions and pretty much every single device and app and thing is just competing for the same thing. your attention, your eyeballs. Just keep scrolling, swiping, watching, just keep you glued to whatever screen that is. And they're all in competition with each other. Netflix is in competition with PlayStation, in competition with YouTube, in competition with Hollywood, movies industry, with music, Apple and Spotify. Like everything is just trying to just get your attention and keep you watching. So they all kind of need to bend around the consumer to a certain extent, because it's all just like, end of the day, you spend in this day and age, you spend, especially in the past year, you spend a lot of your time looking at screens. So it's a case of which what pixels are you looking at on that screen? What's able to get your attention the most? So you need to, my point with that is that you need to respect the consumer's time, because if you don't, they're just gonna play something else or watch something else or read something else or listen to something else. So yeah, it's very important that they just kind of play ball and just let the consumers dictate how do you want to spend your attention.
And aside from anything else, this is a time when people can very easily walk with their feet as well as their wallet. You know, if you sit there and you're, if you sit there and you're a bit of an asshole as a company, people are going to be very much not willing to go ahead and buy your products. You know, like whether that's something like, say, Fortnite going ahead and copying Among Us, which is putting people off of anything that Epic Games is doing, whether it's back in the day Steam's policies for allowing absolute garbage on green light programs that it was running for indie developer games, which were actually just crowding out legitimate indie games with a load of nonsense that was just there to make a quick buck. Whether it's Activision with the recent allegations and the lawsuit that was brought by the state of California with regards to workplace conditions, people are able to walk with their feet really easily, man. And if you're just, regardless of whether you're anti-consumer with them and you just have really bad practices, or whether you're just a bit of a dick, people are going to go ahead and leave your thing with the purchasing power of sending their stuff to another company. It's simple as that.
You vote with your wallet, and these days with your eyeballs as well. What you choose to watch with your attention. Did you see? What did you think of Bungie? Pretty interesting move, changing their policy on account recoveries.
Ooh, this is an interesting
a hard
one.
stance on that, which is very big. I mean, that was obviously, people that don't know, obviously account recovery is just going on someone else's account. Essentially just the classic idea of boosting, but especially with Destiny, like I said, because it's such a social game, there are a lot of things that you need friends to play. Like you need to know people that can get you into this, that you can do this non-matchmade activity. So there grew a massive culture of obviously people that don't want to do that. People just want a shortcut. People just want to pay some money. Dude, hop on my account and do this for me. And it was always something obviously Bungie didn't like, but it was also a very big element of the game because of the nature of the game. Because there are things, in trials and raids that you physically cannot get by yourself. So those things, while they added to the gameplay of making them rare and cool, it also built this culture of people wanting to circumvent that and simply pay people, thus known as account recoveries, just paying people to go on your account. And then you pay by money, pay by, subscribing on Twitch or YouTube or following or gifting, donating, all these kind of things. Just that was a big culture, but now Bungie's officially saying, no, stop it. We're going to ban you.
And for context, like these recoveries would be going for all sorts of crazy. I think it's worth stating. You had whole companies that set up account recovery businesses effectively.
Oh yeah, we've got many emails that have offered us many dollars. That you would not believe how much money people like us have been offered to promote companies like this.
And
very
still,
big business.
because we know of their reputation and what they've done to the game, more often than not, people say no with regards to this stuff. And that's the real big problem. Like, there's the one downside to the consumer, which is that they price stuff in outrageous ways, I think, which is very much one of these things of like Devil's Ruin, for example. That is a 45-minute quest. And you could have people charging $50 for Devil's Ruin. $50, which, to remind you, is the price of an expansion almost.
The whole game. Really.
That's a whole game right there, just for one exotic that takes you 45 minutes to get back in the Season of the Dawn. Not even a really particularly great one, just like a pretty reasonable sidearm with a cool laser beam, and that's it. But this went all the way up to Trials of Osiris runs, and this is where things really get kind of scary, where people would guarantee you flawless for something like $250 to $500. I've seen people go as high as $800 for like a full recurve package for the week, where they'll do your raids, your nightfalls, your everything. You know, like these adverts will pop up on they were so obnoxious. They pop up on our videos in the ads, because this is the way that Google's stuff works. You know, if you have ads and you're watching and, you know, finding cookies around stuff that is related to gaming and Destiny, it's more likely to recommend ads for that. And so people who watch Destiny videos, I bet, will have seen on a bunch of our content tons of ads for recurve services in Destiny. And ultimately, you know, this would seem like a victimless crime if it wasn't for the fact that recurve players, by their very nature, especially in PvP, have to be really good to get this stuff done.
Oh, yeah.
And so effectively, Trials became an entire playlist where it was filled with three kinds of people, effectively. You know, you had the real sweats who were just trying to get their stuff done and who were the legitimate players playing on their own accounts, doing all that stuff. You had the recurves, where you were seeing people jump in on other players' accounts and you'd have these very strange spikes in their skill through certain games because they had this streak where they were just absolutely godly, and then mysteriously their account went offline and the IP address it was playing at changed completely. And you had the third kind of players, which were cheaters, you know? And ultimately, this is one of the things that screwed the health of Trials as a playlist.
Yeah.
So this is a good thing. Like, objectively, this is a good thing. PvE recovs, I don't think we're as much of a problem.
Yeah.
You know, I'd very much
say Devil's
there.
Ruin.
Right? Like, that's a problem in
Still
terms of the fact that, you know, it's an absurd price for something that takes 45 minutes to get. But, you know, I could at least understand that doesn't really harm the actual, you know, core systems of the game. It doesn't harm PvP. It doesn't harm the player base that much if somebody sits there and gets a raid recoved. That I honestly don't mind at all. And that's one of those things of like, I could care less. Because, you know, if some guy's got mythoclast, even if he has had that recoved, it's one of those things of, you know, that's just luck as it was anyway. You know? When it comes to Trials and making that entire playlist more painful to play in, that's a problem. That's a huge issue. So glad that they're doing something about that. Really glad.
That was probably the biggest. You hit the nail on the head. It's not, as far as most of the game goes, no one really cares if you got a thing that was hard to get that you technically didn't earn, that you just paid someone to get. No one really cares. But the only downside is when you have it ruining the player pool of a very important mode to Bungie, being Trials. Again, they're invested in trying to just clean it up and make it just good. And it was definitely one of the problems kind of rotting at the core in terms of, you know, so many teams you'd encounter and they're just doing recoveries. And then you also have the more insidious side of ones that are hacking and cheating and doing it. So it just encourages it. I mean, at its core, it's... you know, I'm not going to knock someone's hustle. I think it's, you know, it's in some ways it's kind of impressive. Like, I kind of respect it. You know, if you can, there are so many ways to make money these days. You look at us, you can create content. But if you're really, really good at a game and you can, if someone's willing to pay you $100 to do some mission that is really easy to you but is impossible to them, or you can do easily because you've got just a god squad and they don't have any friends, like, if you can make money than that, then by all means. Only because technically it wasn't, you know, against any terms of service or illegal. It wasn't like, you know, against the rules. It was just frowned upon. But, you know, there are many ways in this world that you can make money doing things that are frowned upon but not against the law. But at its core, recoveries, it's just a, you know, not going to knock anyone's hustle. It's kind of impressive. It's kind of like, you know, I saw people where they just had just backlogs of people willing to just pay them tons of money to just play a game for them. Like, you know, back in the day, you'd have your friend, oh, can you do this mission for me? Or your brother, oh, can you hand him the controller? But in this day and age, now you have people where it's just like, if you can make money, you can make thousands, tens of thousands. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you know what, it's kind of impressive. But like I said, the core problem is that when you enable that, it becomes a thing and then it grows and then you have this whole kind of community and it kind of goes too far. Like, we've seen, you know, it's been a thing since Destiny 1, but it just progressed and progressed and progressed to the point where now it's kind of rotting away at Trials, which is a very important mode for Bungie. So you can see why they would want to officially ban it. But yeah, it was a thing. It's just one of those things that, you know, if you're going to allow it, and when there's money involved, when there's cold hard cash involved, it's just going to grow and it's going to become an enterprise. And it's kind of like, black market of people doing things, and there's hackers involved. So it's just it's a slippery slope. But you know, it is what it is. It's going to be good for the game as a whole, but I'm sure a lot of people have made a lot of money in the meantime, and a lot of people have earned things that they definitely did not earn themselves. But
yeah, I'll say this again, man. I'm with you with regards to the idea of like, I'm not going to knock the hustle, at least when it comes to PvE.
It's entrepreneurial.
It's entrepreneurial on the PvE side of things, but it harms the end result in the game when it
goes too far.
And that's what, like, if they wanted to add nuance, I'd say ban recoveries in PvP only is a perfectly acceptable piece of nuance on that. And you know, like, at the end of the day, you know, if it's something where a company is charging a morally egregious amount of money for something like that, either your money or your time is worth that amount of money to you, in which case, great, you have a fantastic job, I guess. Or alternatively, you know, find someone else. You know, do something different. And at that point, it's just, it's still not perfect that people are even charging money for this, but my recommendation is always going to be find a good group of friends and play with them. Because that's the best way to play Destiny, best way to experience Destiny, and probably the fastest way. You get through content easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things that mostly, as it started, it was mostly kind of harmless, but then as time goes on, it will get a little bit more, you know, it's going to become just a marketplace, just like anything else, and you're going to have competition, and then it gradually starts to become a problem, more of a problem. I mean, yeah, Bungie was always aware of it for many, many years, but I guess it's reached a point where it's like, okay, we need to kind of do something about it. So yeah, very interesting anyway that Bungie is taking a stance against it, and they're actually officially outlawing it. So I wonder how that's going to change the mode, and whether you'll see much of a difference in gameplay. I mean, I can't pretend like I play a ton of PvP these days, but hopefully it's good for the just general health of the playlist. But yeah, so lots of very interesting stuff as far as Destiny. Like I said, we could talk forever, but I think that'll do it for this episode. Hopefully everyone listening and watching enjoyed, and of course, as always, thank you very much for joining me, Byf.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on here, my dude.
Of course. But yeah, very, very good times for Destiny. It's like I said, the only downside is we've got to wait until February, which is quite a while away. It's always a little bit like, oh, he's showing me all this cool stuff. Got to wait a while. But in the meantime, you know, Season of the Lost is looking good. We've got the Queen, we've got the Dreaming City. We're going to wrap that up. But no, it's good to see. Destiny is a good place, and it's got a very bright future. Even if times are slow, there are droughts, and we know Bear as much as anyone. You know, this game definitely has its droughts, but I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm just excited that there's a longevity kind of plan for the game, and it's good to know that we've got Witch Queen, which would be good, a very big, just kind of like Hive send-off expansion, Lightfall, which will hopefully be Xivu and a bunch of Taken stuff and some new subclasses, Final Shape, which sounds ominous, and whatever else Bungie are doing. But yeah, very, very good times for Destiny. Very exciting. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching or listening. As always, hit the like button, hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Do check out Byf if you want to know anything about the story and what's going on. He has definitely got you covered. He is just absolutely amazing, but he's smashing out so much content. So he is going to be covering everything. Definitely
daily content.
But
daily content, man.
As always, we appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.